So this extraordinary brain, it's so extraordinary, it's mystical, right? Well, this extraordinary brain was telling me 24 hours a day, Martine, you are female, you're a woman, you're a girl. Why do you keep walking around like a boy or a man?
I am Diane Von Furstenberg. Join me for intimate conversations with extraordinary women about the journey of life and survival. This is InCharge. I am so excited for you to meet one of the women I admire the most. Today, we are in Silver Spring, Maryland, to share an intimate conversation with Martine Rothblatt at United Therapeutics. Martine co-founded Sirius XM and sold her stake in the company to save her daughter's life. Martine's story is one of absolute innovation, determination, and survival. I know no one who has accomplished as much as you have, both in the trajectory of your career, of your inventions, and the unbelievable journey of your life.
Thank you so much, Dee. I couldn't wish for a better person to talk with than you.
And we are here in your extraordinary offices.
Yes, this is part of the headquarters of United Therapeutics. These are zero carbon footprint offices that create all of the heating, cooling, and electricity right from the exact place where we are. These are also the offices, Dion, where our company created the medicine that first saved the life of our daughter Genesis and so many other people with different life-threatening illnesses. So today, our company has been in business for over 20 years. We have this one scientist, her name's Layla, who's in charge of growing cells. She's extraordinary. Many other scientists had figured out how to grow millions of cells. She figured out how to grow billions, then hundreds of billions, and now over 1 trillion.
And so what do you do with cells?
We use them to create transplantable organs. It's back to the beginning that my daughter, but for the luck that I was able to come up with this medicine, the chances of her getting a transplant were 1 in 1,000 probably. And unfortunately, every single day, hundreds of people die because they cannot get an organ transplant. By growing these cells, I'm able to grow specifically cardiac cells, lung cells, and grow organs that can then, in sometime in the 2020s, will be approved by the FDA to be transplanted into people. And my personal mission, my gratitude back to the universe for giving me all the good fortune it has given me, is to create an unlimited supply of transplantable organs.
Wow. I don't think, it's extraordinary. I mean, how do you define yourself? I mean, how do you define a person who has touched so many lives, saved so many lives, and is now growing cells that are making transplant possible organs? I mean, how do you define yourself? Who are you?
I define myself just as a regular person. I can tell from looking at you that you don't believe that, but it's true. I see myself as a regular person that I try to do the best that I can each day. I love life and I feel extremely fortunate. And so oftentimes, Dee, what I do, I see myself as like the end point of thousands of years of evolution of women who have given birth and died, given birth and died. And I often ask myself, if my ancestors were sitting here in front of me, what would they say to me? What would the women say who had to just give birth until they died from childbirth, work in a field, starve half the time, freeze almost all the time, had nothing to look forward to other than I'm going to make another generation. If all I do is make another generation. And that's gone on for millennia. Women have literally carried humanity not only in their bellies, but on their backs. And here we are in 2020. And I say to myself almost every day, what would my great-grandmother Jenny say to me? What would even ones that I don't even know say to me the same thing every single day?
What?
They say, Martine, first of all, enjoy your life. We did not suffer for countless thousands of
My
years
mother used to say
for
that
you
to
to have every benefit at your beck and call and not enjoy your life. Enjoy your life.
So we have established that you are a visionary, an inventor, a catalyst in a huge scale. So that's incredible, and we could stop here. But there's something else that is super extraordinary about your life. So take us in that incredible journey that is so mysterious to so many of us.
Sure. So I think I looked like a man, and I think I was perceived as a man, and I did all the things that men are supposed to do. But in the first 40 years, in my heart, in my soul, I never saw myself as a man, nor did I see myself as a little boy. I saw myself as a little girl, and as I went into teenage and beyond, then I always saw myself as a woman. So this extraordinary brain, it's so extraordinary, it's mystical, right? Well, this extraordinary brain was telling me 24 hours a day, Martine, you are female, you are a woman, you're a girl. Why do you keep walking around like a boy or a man?
But did it scare you at first?
I don't know if, I can't say it scared me. I'd say it confused the heck out of me.
Did you share it with anyone?
No, I didn't, because I absolutely knew that it was unacceptable to share that. I was in an environment where, people would, regularly make fun of gay people. And I didn't even really know how to explain to people that I was a woman attracted to women. I had no friend that I could trust that knowledge to.
Of course, but did you actually know that clearly? No.
As a teenager, I did, for sure.
Did.
Yeah.
So you felt like a woman. You felt there was a woman inside you.
I knew I was a woman.
Right.
I knew I was a gay woman, but I knew that every single person knew that I was a straight man.
I mean, is that a... So I personally,
The title of my life would have been that great book by Robert Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land.
Right.
Because that's who I was. I was a stranger in a strange land.
I know, but the thing that is different about you is that somehow everything that happens to you, which, by the way, I relate to very much, everything you turn into a positive. You're not saying it as a victim. You were terrified, you were afraid, you were fearful, because how I always say the most important relationship in life is the one you have with yourself.
And your mantra is be fearless.
Right. And that's how you are in charge. So clearly you were always in charge of yourself because you knew that secret that you could not share with anyone. It was a secret that you were not you had no shame about it.
No, I didn't.
So you really, truly accepted who you were, and therefore you were always in charge.
I was always in charge, and that's a good way to phrase it. Listening to you talk, I realized that in a way, perhaps I was calculating, which has a little bit of a negative tinge to it, but it's accurate. I was calculating all the time that if I came out as a transgendered woman, that there would be negative consequences. I would lose friends, I would lose family, I would lose job opportunities, I would lose my life. And that's what I kept calculating that, so I stayed in the closet, which is not unique to me. I mean, pretty much anybody before they come out, that's why they don't come out, is because they know there are going to be these consequences. But I never felt shame. I loved every part of my body, and I never hated any part of my body. It was only by the time I got to my 20s and 30s that I was able to find books and literature that actually explained this to me and explained that it's just normal human variation. When I got into my 20s, I learned about these tribal people in India and other parts of the world where there's a third gender and they're accepted in their community. So this was very, ratifying for me, validating for me. So when you ask, who am I would say I am also a person that will play the odds. I never look for 100% assurance. I don't even believe that there's such a thing as 100% assurance. Every one of my businesses were risky. There was a probability of success. I've launched satellites only to see them stop working as soon as they've gotten to orbit. I've developed drugs only to see them fail in clinical trials. So I run the probabilities, and I saw the probabilities were very high that I could change my body to conform with how I mentally saw myself, and that in the coming of the turn of the millennium, the 1990s, there would be enough acceptance of transgendered people. Perhaps I would have to move to Colorado and live a small, quiet life. Frankly, I never imagined that I would end up being as accepted as I am in the dominant, heterosexual, cisgender society as I am.
And be one of the highest paid women CEO in the world.
Very happy about that, too.
I mean, really, you truly are a woman in charge. So when did you feel in charge the first time?
Nobody ever asked me that question, so I'm...
That's okay. I mean, I could tell you mine if that helps.
Yes.
Okay, so I felt in charge for the first time when my mother put me in a train by myself. From Brussels to Paris, and it was 5 hours or 6 hours. At the time, it was a long time. And I was maybe 8 years old. And I know I was worried, but of course I would never admit that I was, because I was also so proud. I was so proud, and I felt in charge. And I know that to this day, every time I go, I love going alone. I just feel in charge. So that's mine.
That's a beautiful story, Dee. Thank you for sharing it. It seems like I've felt in charge many, many times in my life. The first time I felt in charge probably was in 10th grade. And my father made an ultimatum. My hair was halfway down my back. And my father said, either cut your hair or get out of the house. This is my house. These are my rules. Cut your hair or get out of the house. And I said, okay, I'll leave the house. And he said, you're going to end up as a high school dropout, and you're going to come back here begging to be let in. And I said, no, I won't. So I walked out of the house. I got a job on Melrose Avenue, and it was in a Persian carpet store where I had to roll and unroll these carpets, and customers want to look at the one at the bottom. So I had to take, 30 of these off and show that one to the customer. I rented the upstairs single apartment of an antique shop on Melrose with 2 other friends who they actually both were high school dropouts. And I kept going to high school, and I kept going to school. I went to school, I went to work, came home, hung out with my friends. And finally, one day I was at school, and the principal's office came and said, your father is here, wants to talk to you. This was 3 or 4 months later. He said, I'm really impressed with what you've done. Please come back home, and you can keep your hair as long as you like. He was a dentist. He says, I have a job opening in our dental lab that you'll be paid, I forgot the exact amount, but let's say 5 times the minimum wage that I was getting. But you'll be working in the dental office. You'll have to cut your hair. So I said, okay, I'll come back. But I felt in charge because I supported myself as a 15-year-old.
That's right.
And I could have done that indefinitely.
That's good. I have other questions, biggest influence on you, your father or your mother?
My mother.
Your mother was a comedian, right?
Yes. She is a very, very positive person. She will see the positive in anything.
That's it. You got that.
She loves making people happy. Her whole purpose in life is making people happy. My father's whole purpose in life was just doing the practical things that needed to be done.
Are your parents still alive?
My mother is. My father passed away about 20 years ago.
And is your mother super proud of you?
She is, as was my father. My father invested in all my companies. He was the happiest I think I ever saw my father was when Sirius XM went public. And he told me, I didn't actually know that he bought shares after it went public. And then he began telling me the stock price got up to 30 after 40. And so money was like more important to him. I think my mom has always been clueless about money. So he was very, very proud. And that was after I transitioned. If you ask me when I was proudest of my father, after I came out, there was a television show that wanted me to go on the show with Bina and my kids and explain what did it mean to be transgendered. So we went on this show, and my parents were in the green room beforehand, and then they were in the audience afterwards. So I'm on a television stage with Bina and my kids, and then a woman stood up in the audience and said, I don't care if you put a Chevy engine in a Ford truck, it's still going to be a Ford truck. And then the television personality, she said, well, Martine, what do you think about that? I know your parents are here in the audience. Maybe we should ask them. Dr. Rothblatt, talking about my father, what do you think about that? And he stood up there in front of this whole audience of, a couple hundred people, knowing it was broadcast on television. He said, I love Martine just exactly as she is. So whether I'm a Ford or a Chevy or a Ford and a Chevy, I have felt full love from both my parents and from my partner, Bina, and from all 4 of my children and from all 5 of my grandchildren. And I consider myself one of the luckiest people ever alive.
And you are absolutely blessed. Do you ever feel like a loser? And when you do, what do you do about it?
I do sometimes feel like a loser, at least a little bit, when one of my projects fails. One example would be I spent several years designing a clinical trial for a medicine to cure pulmonary hypertension. And last year, the clinical trial was over. It was a blinded clinical trial. Nobody could know who was on the medicine or the placebo. And it turned out that the trial failed. And I felt like a loser over that. So what I did is I did turn it from a negative to a positive. I said, our goal here at United Therapeutics is to do great science. And science is not faith. Faith, there is always one answer, and it's always the same answer. Science, you have to do an experiment to determine the answer. We now know that this type of medicine is not going to be useful for pulmonary hypertension. So it's maybe a good thing that we found out now rather than spending more and more years going down a dead end. So I transferred my sense of being a loser. I transferred it to the medicine, and I made the medicine a loser, which is what it was.
Your optimism and your ability to dissect any situation is a very unusual but extremely effective formula. And since you are into formula, you're the formula queen.
Oh, thank you. I accept. I love that. I love that moniker, the formula queen. Thank you so much.
But I still go back. Who are you? How do you define yourself? Are you a magician? Are you a superhero? Are you a conduit?
I'm a pragmatist. I'm a person who is good at seeing a big problem and dividing it up into small pieces and making the small pieces like a puzzle. There is a logical way for those small pieces to fit together that if we do each small piece right, we will end up with the big goal accomplished.
Okay, so we'll settle that you are a visionary that doesn't take no for an answer. Will you agree with that?
Not completely. I will agree I'm a visionary, but when I see that something is impractical, I will stop that pathway and go to a different pathway. Right. Most people go to the place that everybody else is going. When everyone is running in one direction, most people run in that way. When there's a new market, whether it's a market for music, for apps, for art, for fashion, everybody tries to copy that new market. People forget about the corridor of indifference. Nobody's interested in what nobody is interested in. However, that means that that's the place that you can make a big difference. It's always better to be a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond. So identifying the corridor of indifference, like rare diseases, and then running like hell down them, meaning like mastering that corridor before anybody else can master it, that to me is the key to success.
That's fascinating. So do you think that all your discovery with satellite was also found in the
Absolutely.
park?
Nobody believed that Sirius XM would be successful. People said to me, why would anybody pay for radio? That was a corridor of indifference. You can get AM and FM radio for free. I said, well, there are a lot of genres of radio that it doesn't make economic sense for people to broadcast in one city because there's too few people that like that genre. But with satellites, you have a whole nation of people to draw upon, and people will gladly pay for that. They didn't believe it. And another thing they didn't believe is that it was possible for a satellite signal to go from 1/10 of the way to the moon, all the way through the sky, the trees, everything, and then be received by a car. So what I did is this kind of divide the problem into small pieces. I made a pseudo-satellite. I made a radio transmitter that had the same power of a satellite, and I put it on top of a tall building. And then I made an antenna, and I put it on top of a car. And I drove with that pseudo-satellite through Rock Creek Park, which is the big park in the middle of Washington, D.C. And I took the Federal Communications Commission staff with me, and they heard the music playing. They said, okay, we guess it does work.
So take me back at your life. Where were you born? What happened to you as a young person? And how you made your first major invention?
Yes, so I was born in Chicago, but my father very wisely moved us to San Diego when I was just a year old. And I grew up in San Diego, ended up going to UCLA, and becoming absolutely fascinated with satellite communications. Ultimately, my first invention was developing a way for satellite communications to connect the whole world together with radio.
So originally you went to CLA?
Yes.
UCLA for?
I just went there because that's what you do after you graduate high school, and my major was undeclared. So I had no idea what I was doing there. And I felt I was wasting my time. I was bored. So I left after 1 year and went traveling around the world, finally ending up in the Seychelles Islands. And there in the Seychelles Islands, I'm an amateur musician. So I was playing keyboards in a band, entertaining at hotels with other Seychellois people my age. And one of them said, hey, Martine, would you like to see the NASA tracking station? And I said, I didn't even know there was a NASA tracking station. He said, it's at the highest point of Mahe, the main island in the Seychelles. And there was a super modern NASA tracking station. We knocked on
What year are we?
We are in 1974. So I had a revelation, an epiphany, that if satellites could control the orbits and the information of NASA spacecraft going to all different planets, why couldn't they also be used to bring all of the world together? Already people were listening to Michael Jackson's music in every part of the world. through Walkman and cassette recorders, but this was reaching only a small number of people. I thought we could use satellites to sew together, to knit together the entire world into a common framework. And so I made a beeline, from the Seychelles, which are in the middle of the Indian Ocean, all the way back to UCLA. I looked at the catalog. They had a brand new major that they had just opened up called Communication Studies. And it said this is an interdisciplinary major of electrical engineering, social psychology, and mass media, how to bring it all together. I said, it's perfect for me. I enrolled in it, and I spent all of my time developing new ways to use satellites. Before I graduated undergraduate, I created an idea for a direct television broadcasting satellite system. Today, that's known as DirecTV. Oh. And then I went into law school and management school, and I developed another type of technology that would send television programming from Latin America, such as from groups like Televisa, to North America, and from the Spanish-speaking content from North America down to South America. And that became known as PanAmSat, which is now the largest satellite system in the world. And one of the other ideas I developed is this idea of using satellites to track vehicles, driving everywhere around so people wouldn't lose their trucks or rail cars or their way navigating. And that became known as the GPS system.
Oh, my God. So by then you are how old?
By the time of all of these things, I've graduated from college and law school. And the time when I launched Sirius XM, I was 30 years old.
Wow. So by the age of 30, you have managed to connect all the airwaves of sound. I mean, that is pretty amazing.
It's nice of you to say that, but for me, it was just a natural thing to do, Dee, because the idea that just by changing electromagnetic energy from negative to positive, thousands or millions of times a second, you can make a wave that goes through the atmosphere and around the entire globe and unite everybody together. Who could not be entranced by that magic?
It's amazing. All right. And then what happened? Something unfortunate happened that made you turn in a whole other direction.
Yes, I married and we had 4 children. And our youngest daughter, Genesis, we were skiing in Telluride and she couldn't get up to the ski lift. She couldn't even want to leave the room. So we brought her to doctors, and first they thought it was the flu, then they thought it was asthma. She was getting worse and worse. She was fainting. Her lips turned blue.
How old was she?
She was only 6 years old.
Oh.
Finally, I found myself at Children's National Medical Center here in Washington, D.C., in the room with Genesis and Dr. Roger Ruckman, who's the chairman of pediatric cardiology there, telling me, I'm very sorry, Martine, your daughter has a fatal illness, pulmonary arterial hypertension. It's very rare. Only a couple thousand people in the whole U.S. have it. I've had 3 or 4 patients with this. They've all died within 3 to 4 years. There's nothing that we could do. Your only hope is to get a lung transplant for her, but it's very hard to get a lung transplant for such a small body. So I was like crying my eyes out. Then I thought quickly, what can I do about this? So I said, surely there must be some doctors or scientists working on a cure. He said, not to his knowledge, because there are so few people who have this illness. And I said, is there anything I can do? And he said, you could go down to this other floor where the transplant department is and fill out all these many forms to enlist your daughter on the waiting list for a transplant of a lung. So it was the darkest moment in my life, Dee. I mean, everything just turned black. And my first concern was to hold Genesis's hand, my daughter's hand, and to be with her. They moved her to the intensive care ward. And when she was up there, eventually she'd fall asleep, and I'm in the hospital. So I went down to their basement where they had a library, a real library with books and magazine journal articles. And I just began reading everything I could about this pulmonary hypertension illness. So then the next thing I did is I looked at the journal articles published by scientists, and I wrote down their name and the hospital. I asked my staff to find me their addresses, and I wrote what's called in the satellite communications industry a request for proposals. And I said that I would be willing to spend $1 million a year on a research program that could lead to a cure for pulmonary hypertension. So I funded these 5 researchers $1 million a year.
Wow.
Fortunately, by that time, Sirius had already gone public. I had adequate financial resources to do that. Quarter by quarter, I flew around and met with each of these researchers. And it was disappointing, Dee, because they were not on the schedule that they had promised to be in their grant proposal. And meanwhile, Genesis now can no longer go to her elementary school because she keeps fainting. She faints because her heart can't pump enough blood to the lungs to get fresh oxygen. Her lips are always blue. But one of these 5 researchers that I funded, Dr. Robin Barst at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, she said, Martine, the only way that you're going to help Genesis is if you come up with a medicine on your own, and you do this on your own the same way that you launch satellites.
Wow.
She said the same skills that you had to launch these television broadcasting satellites and radio broadcasting satellites, those are the same skills that you can use to build a company that will cure this disease. So the idea had never come to my mind, Dee, to do a commercial venture to save my daughter's life. It seemed like oil and water. I thought that wealthier people just donated money and that's how you move forward on these diseases. But Dr. Barst told me, no, that's a way to actually make no progress, And she said, you could do it yourself. And I said, where do I start? She said that a big pharmaceutical company called Burroughs Wellcome was developing a medicine that would treat pulmonary hypertension. But they had just been purchased by an even bigger pharmaceutical company called GlaxoSmithKline. Mm-hmm. And they sent an announcement to everybody that they were discontinuing the development of any rare disease. They were only going to focus on diseases that would promise more than $1 billion a year in revenues because the costs were astronomical to develop these medicines. And she said that the scientist at Burroughs Wellcome who was working on this treatment was so disappointed that he took early retirement, and that I should go and find this scientist and get this molecule out of GlaxoSmithKline as a business and develop it as a business to treat this disease.
Oh, my God. So you found this scientist who had taken early retirement?
I found him. And
what's his name?
Jim Crow. Dr. Jim Crow.
What a name.
What a name. So I go to meet Dr. James Crow, who's in fact a PhD in biostatistical medicine, very charming man, nice Southern manners. And he said, this is very difficult to develop a medicine from scratch. I said, no, this is my whole purpose in life, Jim. I'm going to save my daughter. He said, well, if you want me to help you, I can't do it myself. You have to hire several other people along with me. You have to guarantee our salary for so many years. And you're going to have to open up a laboratory in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, where he lived. And that's where Glaxo Wellcome's U.S. headquarters is. So then he did help me. Indeed, to flash forward from then, when nobody thought I had like a chance in hell, to now.
To save your daughter.
To save my daughter. Nobody thought this medicine was good for anything. Now this medicine for more than a decade has produced over $1 billion a year in revenues. My daughter is saved. She's now over 30. She's vibrant.
I know her. She's beautiful.
She works in our company. In fact, 50 times more people are alive today with pulmonary hypertension than when we started, because they all used to just die with no medicine, and now they can take our medicines and stay alive.
It is true. It is like engineering, isn't it?
It is engineering. In fact, my mantra, Dee, is that biology is technology.
This has been an extraordinary conversation. And I came in this place full of respect and love and admiration. and I am leaving with more of all of it. I respect you, I love you, I admire you, and you are a role model to all humans.
Thank you so much, Dee. It's a delight for me to have you in my office and being embraced by you, Dee, with everything that you've accomplished. This is like one of the peak experiences of my whole life.
This episode of InCharge with DVF was produced by Frequency Media and Spotify Studios. Michelle Corey and Ina Garkusha are our producers from Frequency. Liz Gately, Erica Clark, and Christina Choi are producers from Spotify. Peter Lopinto is our editor. Our sound engineer is Dante Hodge. Special thanks to Shirley Ramos, Natalie Tuller, Jessica Olivier, and Becca Godwin.